Hello, my friends. How are you guys doing? How are you guys doing? I'm really proud that you made it. I'm really, really proud of you, taking how great was the after party last night. For those who just joined us, my name is Olaf Różański. I'm here on behalf of Krakow Technology Park. And let me very warmly welcome you to the second day of Digital Dragons 2018. Thank you very much. We still have a really, really great day ahead of us. Plenty of discussions, plenty of really great lectures. And without further delay, let me welcome to the stage Mr. Michal Wnuk from Techland, and he will give us his lecture on how to use words. Mr. Michal Wnuk.
Thank you, guys. So this is the first time I hear myself, so that works. Good. I'm utterly surprised of so many showing yourself here at this hour, which means either you're amazingly dedicated or utterly masochistic. I'll take any. So yeah, without further ado, this is me, basically. I've been I'm somewhere there to the left. I've been a language consultant for Techland since April Fool's Day 2016. So there's your first joke. And I got a few stories for you about how to use words, which I'm in a lot of need of in this morning. So yeah, there's a story about Spartans who were visited by emissaries from the island of Samos. And the emissaries made a very eloquent case that they're amazingly impoverished and hungry and they need food. But the whole presentation was so long-winded that the Spartans at the end said that they can neither care or remember the beginning of it or the middle, so they don't know how to answer, so they send the envoys off. And when the envoys returned, still having famine to deal with at their own lands, they brought a bag, took the bag, indicated it, and said, "The bag needs flour." To which the Spartans replied, "You needn't have said the bag, it's implied." And they gave them the food. So there's different approaches to language. That was, of course, Kratos from Santa Monica Studios. God of War. And there's a more serious one, which is, for example, 1970s paper on performance grammars that was actually supported and financed by the Department of Defense of the United States and by ARPA, which was the Advanced Research Projects Agency. And that might be a random fact, but that's actually referenced in Ralph Costa's A Fury of Fun. So that is actually connected with game dev. So yeah, the thing is, what do? At Techland, I basically translate all of the stuff that passes through the company. So from even the simplest HR stuff to game documentation, meetings, all stuff like that, narrative dialogue. Yeah, I think I get a bit of everything, and all kinds of company communication. And now, before that, I used to do some stuff I translated for Wars card game by Decipher. I've actually translated Professor Challenger's story by Arthur Conan Doyle. And I translated this guy who you should probably know because you have his invention at most of your homes. He's the guy who invented the blue LED, the Nobel Prize winner in physics, Professor Shinji Nakamura. And my only contact with game dev before that was a little game called The Madness of Little Emma. This is a scary scene, by the way. And yeah, which some people enjoyed, and the other people called it it's like Binding of Isaac, but shit. But it's still got good reviews. The fact is that I get most of the stuff that's written in the company between my eyes. So I think I have I have a picture of what it actually is, or at least I've stupidly assumed so. I get all that communication, and sometimes I even push it along the pipes if something doesn't work. And yeah, the basic thing is using words, which is the thing is you use different language for communication, which is obviously the way people talk to each other. The different way to use it in documentation, and different way to use it in prose. And in prose, what we mean in the industry is usually dialogue and narrative. So I'm not going to teach you how to use it in narrative. Obviously, there's enough of narrative designers and writers here. Well, as with the story of Spartans, when I usually ask for someone to explain something to me, and I hear the whole story of a feature without the actual answer to my question. Usually in communication, what's important to be is obviously concise, and documentation to explain it yourself. And that's a totally different thing when you're sending something outside of the company, which needs to be ready. So while I could change or improve upon text on communication, on documentation, there's no need for that, and there usually shouldn't be time spent on that. So feel free to make any mistakes you like on communication. Yeah. The first thing Fallout taught us is that war never changes, but the language does. And the thing is, especially during war, but that's a totally different subject. The thing is, language, especially the English language, mutates a bunch. And even some things get more or less complicated. You probably know the word light. Now it changes into lit, as in past. But it used to be lighted, and it still stays in the word highlight, which is highlighted instead of highlit, as it probably should be. And we break language all the time. According to the Oxford English Dictionary, the name literally now means both literally and figuratively. Because when you say you come back from a party and you said my head was literally exploding. So you don't mean it exploded because you're still talking with your mouth. That's a part of your head. But the way you use it actually changed the meaning of the word. And yeah, apart from that, there's the obvious approach to languages, prescriptivism and descriptivism, which people realized, okay, so should we use language as it is used? So that's proper, and that's descriptivism, or describing how language is used, or prescriptivism. So we have a set of rules, and that's how the language is supposed to be done. Of course, I prefer something in the middle here, because none of these are holy words in these terms. But yeah, that's how it works. So yeah, standards. One of my favorite words, because there's no such thing as standards. The fact that it's plural means that standard is meaningless, because that's what it should mean. A standard is one, like the meter in Sèvres under Paris. And the words we use for standards, like good standards, bad standards, different standards, or double standards. All of these words are actually detrimental to the word standard, and ending up with standard not meaning anything at all. For example, the words we use in the company, if we have a sentence that there needs to be support for Bob in the VS situation. And VS usually stands for verses. In Polish, it's written without a dot at the end. In English, it's with a dot at the end. But it also means vertical slice in our documentation. And when people write it in capital letters, that makes sense. Okay, VS is obviously here not verses. It's vertical slice. But if it's written as such without the capitalization. So there needs to be support for Bob in the VS situation. And we don't know if it's a dual that Bob has, if it's in the vertical slice, or if, well, still, we don't know if Bob is a character or a level designer. So you have no bloody idea what actually a person meant. And that is a bit of a problem. So you even sometimes have to care about in communication with the capitalization of words, which is tricky, I know, but yeah, there we come to that. The obvious thing, potato and potato, which is brilliant when you look at it this way, because it's potato versus potato, and the famous dot after VS. So the funny thing is, when sometimes I'm asked, for example, in terms of standards, if we use British English or American English or such like, and I usually say I use whatever translates the best in this case, and then we're going to care if when it's leaving the company to standardize it to one thing, to localize it. So if there's a saying in English that fits a saying in Polish, or there's a saying in the American or any other version of English, that we're going to use that. And then if it stops being the work in progress, then we're going to care about that. Another thing about standards is, for example, this is one of the graphic designers, Chaha's approach to how we had beer last year for the 25th anniversary, and that's Anderson from our Dying Light game, and that should be simple. The guys at the company came up with a name, and we should, keep with it. So this is actually, I think, all of the versions of the use of the word in our in-house communication and documentation. And if I was a real professional, the size of the font should indicate how often these are used. But no, I'm a hack, so these are just random font sizes just for it to look good. So the thing is, what can you do when you can't keep up with all of the versions of a word you actually came up with? And I had an idea for that, and if I can switch that, I'll even show it to you. So there's another thing about standards here, going twice, and that is, I realized, okay, so we got all these mistakes or versions of reality, so maybe we should standardize and maintain order in all of that chaos. So I decided, how to best do it. I designed a PSA for the company, and it turned out to be a good idea. People somehow liked it. This is Bogdan's desk. He's got the PSA with pictures from Wizards of the Coast, Dungeons and Dragons, because one of the ideas for, when people use language is, okay, this sounds similar enough, so we should use that word as in English. Just pronounce it differently. And so a Polish word for facial expressions is mimika. And so people say, okay, so in English it should be mimics. Now, mimics are these guys that are a magical chest that are actually creature that wants to eat you, which I made a point of explaining in that beautiful PSA. And some other shifts as such. And yeah, actually, I thought I'm going to be a total asshole by explaining to people how they should use words. But it turned out it became quite popular, and people even enjoyed it and started discussing it. So there's notes. We can probably see them. People discussing with what I've written. So, for example, the numbering of floors in Polish and in all kinds of English. which is a problem when you want to go to the first floor, and that's actually the ground floor, and so on and so forth. So here's some people actually arguing that there's no problem with that. Well, there is. Tell the truth. But yeah, so that's one thing about that. And these are actually hanging in our kitchens on every level of the company in Wrocław. And what else? Yeah, shifting subject a bit. This is a quote I very much enjoy, and it is true. Perfect is the enemy of done. Well, as I've said before, if something is staying in-house, it doesn't need to be perfect, especially in terms of communication, in terms of documentation. It only has to be understandable. But there's a level of understandability that you have to keep, which is please, at least if there's a rule that there should be a comma in front of a specific word, and you get taught that in elementary school, please at least care about that, because it just spoils the whole flow of the text. And yeah, even if I have drafts, sometimes I have to change some stuff because it's scary. Another thing, there's a beautiful Polish word, "siedzoga." Yeah, crepuscular rays. That's the thing when you get rays of sunshine going through ash in the air, or through dust and fog. Beautiful Polish word. And the thing is that when I usually get a text and when it's narrative, and there's a lot, for example, proper names, and I ask, okay, how much of a work in progress is that? Do I have to, spend some time on the names, or just okay, Bay of Pigs? Okay, that's simple enough. It conveys the message. And actually, in a case of a work in progress, we had a situation with the Warsaw studio that there was a word in Polish with no direct translation into English, and the problem was so awful that even the English writers the English folks in the Warsaw studio started to use the Polish word. I can't tell you what it is, but similar to that one. So the guys told me to come up with a word of a translation of that, or like actually make up a word, and I did, and we've been using that for months now, or more than a year now, and it's good. So that's how it works. So yeah, the thing is, it's in terms of making up words, the awful thing is that we actually have to create language sometime, and in this case, the awful thing is that I'm under NDA, so I can't tell you of all the words I've made up so far. But just to make it up for you, here's something indescribable, so you don't feel cheated. Or utterly crazy. So there's another thing about words actually problematic, and that is the case of something that some people think is actually political, which is pronouns. And yeah, the thing was, one of the writers at some point in Wrocław asked me to, okay, just give me a standard, because I have enough of that he/she option, which is shit in text, and it doesn't even cover all the options, and just give me something that I could use. Okay, so I talked to some other writers, I talked to my boss, and came up with a standard that actually has gender-neutral pronouns, which helps, because different languages have a very specific way of calling stuff. For example, a bridge in Spanish is masculine, and in German it's feminine. So in Spanish, a bridge could be, strong, and in German it would be beautiful. So it defines language so much. And yeah, when it's the other way around, when you actually use the he, she, stuff like that, you have the situation with the Monty Python sketch from Life of Brian, which actually tells you you have to care if a brother or a sister tries to do something, and if they want, and if he wants or she wants, and they discuss it that way with breaks for it at every junction. And I say, what was I talking about? I think you've done. Oh, fine. They don't make any point at all. And there's also Eddie Izzard here, who actually makes a point of the gender of many words. Like, for example, a French word for makeup, which is masculine, which doesn't make sense at all. It's the same in Polish, by the way. So yeah, so this is how it looks like. These have been actually used from the 14th century on. There was a lot of backlash for that in the 19th and 20th centuries. But for example, in the 20th century, there was a lot of backlash for using the word miss for a woman, when we realized that maybe it's not the best idea of introducing a human being first by describing their marital status, but only for one gender. So yeah, things change, hopefully. And yeah, and that's just not only theory. This the thing how language defines the way we think is well. Obviously, I'm not going to go as far as what they did in Arrival with the Sapir-Whorf theory, but. Yeah, so I made a standard for using gender-neutral pronouns, send it over to the producers, and there was one question about one thing. Okay, so how does that exchange? I said, oh, this way. And it's done, and we mostly keep to it, mostly. But another things, because usually people think that, okay, you just change, you describe an NPC, and you don't care what gender they are. And I say, okay, let it be a he. I say, because that's by default. You're a man. You want it to be a he, and then you just change it to she or someone else, and that's fine. Oh no, it's not. The funny thing is, there's an article from The Guardian based on a very nice paper about the actual use of words. They've based, as you can see, the analysis of more than 100,000 novels for the last from the last 200 years, and they made a model designing in such a way that by using a bunch of words which weren't gender specific, like husband, wife, boy, girl, stuff like that, they use totally different words that should be neutral, and they could actually the model could actually tell you of a character's gender by these words with 77% accuracy. For example, as it's described here, women in novels have tended to feel, while men get. Women smile, men grin. So you have all of these words that actually can tell you of the gender of a character without someone explicitly saying, she did it. Stuff like that. So that's one thing. The other thing is, for example, I think this speaks for itself. So a child's gender can be detected in the speech from age 5. Because you can't hear from a child's voice usually what gender they are because they're a kid. And it all sounds similar. But they're very fast learners, and they catch all of the social cues, and you can actually tell of a kid's gender by the way they speak. So it's actually very important to have the gender-neutral pronoun there. if you don't care what the gender is, and then you know what you have to change. Yeah, this is actually the actual paper. This is a rather short read. I would recommend that to you. It's amazing how much they've got from the model, and not only from the Guardian article. What was that? Yeah, and so there's the other thing of. So this sounds a lot like telling people what to do and how. And the thing is, how not to be an ass about that. Well, yeah, about that. So I try not to, but yeah, it is a lot of telling people how to use language, which everyone thinks they know how to use language. Okay, I got legs, I can walk. I was like, yeah, I got, I know them words. I got the best words. There's a guy I think who's telling that all the time. But yeah, the thing is, you point out other people's mistakes, and you tell people how how making mistakes works, and it's a natural part of doing anything. I forgot the word for it. You probably know that one. It's called work. And so the point is that actually, when you point out people's mistakes, and it actually opens you to a situation, and okay, when you make a mistake, there's a reaction to that one, and there's an amazing thing about it, because well, okay, so you point out all the mistakes. When you make a mistake, people are actually happy to point out your mistakes, which either of being work friendly or not. And the funniest thing, either way you win, because people, or either from friendship, professionalism, or out of spite, help you do your job better. So that's the funny thing. And the thing is, when I talk to people, when I explain stuff, and when I basically do my job, the thing is, there's an amazing amount of trust for a specialist. And you need that trust, because you're going to tell people things that are counterintuitive, things that are against what people think or have learned or brought from home. And you have to be able to have, at least a modicum amount of trust, so that people won't just, wave their hands at, yeah, okay, yeah, fine, yeah, mm-hmm. So that was a brilliant one. With the other thing, misunderstandings, the funny ones and the not so much. I had a situation recently with a doctor, and because I had a sore throat, I actually had laryngitis, and the doctor asked me, okay, so what do you do? And I said, okay, I'm a linguist. And I said, oh, so you don't need, so she wrote something down. I said, oh, so you don't need sick leave because it's vacations now. I said, what? I'm not a teacher. I said, oh, okay, so what do you do? I said, I make video games. Oh, self-employment, okay. I said, what, why? So yeah, that was a situation that I couldn't actually get out of. But that wasn't important, so, that wasn't, that was only about my health. So when you get situations in the company when you're working, there's lots of things with misunderstandings that can happen. The better option is actually when you offend someone, it's usually easier to get out of because you probably didn't mean it in terms of a misunderstanding. The awful thing is if you say something that's inadvertently funny, and then you're in other shit because everyone's laughing, you're losing time, you can't get back to the topic, and you're all on the clock. So there's two ways I think you can figure that out is either run the joke to the ground, because either everyone's thinking about it, or you can explain the joke, which breaks this amazing social feeling when you hear the joke and you're all laughing and it's like, oh, I feel good because I understood what these guys understood at the same time, and that's a bonding experience. And when you explain the joke, that feeling subsides and you can carry on with the work. So that's one thing. And yeah, this I'm actually proud of. It's offending people. It's just like killing people. So it's both easier and harder than you think. So you can do that by accident or not. The thing was, I got a couple of brilliant quotes for that. And there's a British Conservative MP who wanted to offend his colleague and call him someone who buys his own furniture, which is completely and utterly non-understandable for us normal proles. And the fact is that indicates that the guy is new to money, because you don't buy furniture, you inherit furniture. So that implies that the guy isn't a true Tory MP, because he's not from old money, he's not from the gentry, stuff like that. And that calling someone who buys their own furniture was actually offensive. And now something closer to home is, and this is probably gonna hurt a bit. So I was once asked, okay, so what do you do? And I said, I make video games, which is simple enough. And the answer was, you make them or you test them? I said, oh shit. You can't answer that question because that would imply that the question is valid. And first of all, it's not, and then it's offensive. And I can't remember how I got out of that situation, but it's making games. You're an asshole by saying that. So yeah, and that of that, this is using words of shortcomings, i.e., failures. So yeah, either whatever you do, you're going to make mistakes. You're going to fail. It's called work, as I've said before. So it's a bit of a personal touch. So for example, I do simultaneous translations of meetings, like reviews and such like. And once I was translating a concept art meeting. I think it took an hour or something like that, and it was concerning NPC clothes, clothing, attire, and I forgot the word sleeve. So for an hour, I had this 1 or 2 second moment when someone says sleeve, and continue, and I had to describe what a sleeve is because I forgot the bloody word. So it was okay. So from the cuff to the arm, and stuff like that. It was it's gonna happen. It's gonna happen in any language. You're gonna forget words, and working around it is sometimes fun and sometimes not. So another thing is there a point to all this? Because that's a classic, isn't it? Before me, other people were doing my job, and because it's something that has to be done, there has to be some editing, some translation, and now there's just one dedicated person that does that, and hopefully does a better job by virtue of being a specialist in the field. And it's hard sometimes to explain. Okay, so why do you? There's no need to correct native speakers, right? I say, well, but this guy, for example, this guy is a designer, this guy is a programmer. I'm a linguist, so I know the language a bit better. That's kind of the point, kind of what I do. And so when I'm talking to a person, yeah, I also know Polish better than you, so that's why you pay me money. So it's hard for some people to understand that this is actually my job. And the thing is that usually people think, well, I know language. I've been born here. I've been taught it since childhood. I've been using it for 30 or some years. I was like, yeah, but most of us have legs, and I don't see us doing this stuff very much. So I'm not saying I'm at this level of using words, but still I'm somewhere in between, your usual couch potato and these guys. So yeah, I try. And so the fact is, to get through that barrier, another thing, people claim, okay, everyone knows that you should clean after yourself. Well, yeah, we know how well that works. Yeah, that's how that works. And yeah, the third time, the standards. So yeah, is there a need for someone like me to do what I do? I think the answer to that one is well, in a Polish company that works in an industry that's generally English speaking, it's advisable to have someone to care about it. It doesn't have to be a dedicated person. But it's very useful to just take a look around from time to time and see, okay, are we saying this right? So the thing was, when I got employed at the actual first meeting, I got asked to translate an email on a piece of paper. And I said, wow, I haven't translated anything on a piece of paper since high school. So that was fun. And I got 15 minutes for that. And there was a lot of that. So, okay, I have to finish. Okay, I got this much. I said, oh, this is not school. Continue. Because when you're recruiting a specialist, you're actually recruiting someone that specializes in something that you don't know as much about. So how to recruit a specialist, someone who knows more about the thing that you don't know enough about. And the people at Techland at this point didn't have the idea even of how much it would normally take for a translation like that. So it's hard to judge by all types of standards. And the thing was, I was even asked, okay, so why did you translate it this way? Could you just simplify it concerning the email? I said, yeah, I could, but I'm not going to tell you how to communicate unless you tell me to, which now at times I'm doing. Yeah, I think if you want to actually have a set of standards and everything being up to snuff, you should at least have someone who, for part-time, does what I do. And that's not surprising that I'm promoting what I'm doing. But yeah, so I think that's enough for me for today. If there's questions, I will gladly take them. So this is me, this is my email, and this is a joke that used to be funny, which is my account on Twitter. And apart from that, there's also one presentation today by Kasia Ternacka. It's in the B Hall, and it's concerning creating environments in games. So please go to that one. It's gonna be great. Yeah, Kasia's laughing in there. Yeah, thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Do we have any questions right now? Just raise your hand.
Oh, there's one.
Yeah, hi.
Hi.
Thanks for the presentation. And the language is changing. And
Constantly, yeah.
from the preschool, we are constantly advised to use some words, or we are pointed the mistakes. And I wonder if there is a point that you use the words in some way that they're somehow connected, somehow sucked up to the language, or something like that. So you misspell them or change the meaning or something like that. And where is the point where it's no longer a mistake? Then you should use it, actually.
Well, the thing is, I usually trust the Oxford English Dictionary for that. But the thing I use is whatever I do, for example, I know I'm polishing my shoes or I'm cleaning my house, I have a headset on and I'm listening to podcasts, to vlogs, to stuff like that, because language is constantly changing. And the thing that the internet gave me as a tool, which is utterly brilliant, is that people will tell you where they're from, what's their education, and then you can hear what they do, and you can hear, okay, so this type of person uses language this way, this type of person uses it this way, and then you have a cross-reference for how specific people use language. And so you just have to check and listen to how people use the language, because you obviously know how the language is supposed to be used as for the prescriptivism option, and the descriptivism part you have to usually take care by yourself. Although you can read updates on the language. There are actually updates on the language on the internet. But for example, when I heard the word bangs for the first time, used for hair or fringe, and I heard it a couple of times from vloggers, and then I heard it in a TV series. I said, okay, so now it's used. So yeah, you have to have a few sources to corroborate the fact, and just see how it works.
So you really can't have a standard for some words because of...
There's no such thing as a standard, as I've said before. Yeah, right. Yeah, unfortunately that works that way.
But if some group of people is using the word that way, if you go to the other group of people and talk in this way, is it a mistake or not?
Well, the thing is, if the point is to communicate, you have to use the lingo that the other group understands. So when you're amongst each other, you can use the word if that makes sense. Although if it's too costly to switch in between communication between groups, then you should probably also switch it within the group. So yeah, it was referenced yesterday with box and chatters. In terms of video games. So yeah, that is problematic, and we don't have a standard, and we probably won't have. But yeah, you have to know about the differences. That's the best you can do, and then look at people's faces, how they react, how you use the wrong word.
Yeah, right. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other questions? Oh, I think there's one. Oh, wow.
Hi. Given the fact that...
Hi, Arthur.
Hi. Given the fact that non-native English speakers tend to communicate more efficiently between themselves than they do than native speakers communicate with them, is it really necessary to correct and bring up the language of non-native speakers to a native speaker standards?
Well, the thing is... yeah, even in English, when for example, when Poles communicate in English in front of native speakers, they usually, switch some words around and stuff like that, because they're all Polish and they understand, okay, this makes sense for me as we understand English. So if I make this change, the other person will understand that, and the native speaker doesn't at all, because it doesn't make sense for them, because it's Polish grammar or Polish word inserted. The thing is, you know, you do whatever works. The fact is, when a kid learns to walk, you first see, okay, this doesn't work, it doesn't work, and you don't say, okay, no, you're doing that wrong. No, if you figure it out, and figure it out by yourself, and it works, and I'm saying kid not in terms of, you know, that people are, you know, in some way impaired, because a kid is an amazing organism that learns fast. So that's actually a compliment in that matter. So, yeah, the thing is, there is a reason to tell people about the mistakes that actually make communication harder, and not about the mistakes that just don't sound good enough in English. So yeah, that was the one with mimics, for example. So time's up, as I can hear. So thanks for the question. Hopefully that answers that. And thank you again. And see you later if you have any other questions.
Thank you very much.
Thank you.